Nearly 30 years ago in 1987, a peculiar game called Mega Man released in late December and has since become a world-renowned video game franchise. From starring a blue robot that could jump, shoot, and absorb an enemy's power-up, to later models doing more of the same thing except protecting the innocent in a pessimistic, desolate future. I've praised the Mega Man X SNES trilogy for being some of the most fun games ever released on the system, but it's time to go back to Mega Man's simple origins on the NES and how the classic series changed gaming history. So without further ado, join me for the 6-part retrospective on the classic Mega Man NES hexology. Hello everyone, Alec Elger the SideQuest Gamer here, and welcome to part 1 of my Mega Man Classic NES retrospective, where I will look at Mega Man. What else? The first entry. Mega Man, the NES game that's more reputable for having hideous box art than being a decade-defining NES game. I mean, look at this. Who would want to buy a game starring a fat slob of a space ranger holding a ray gun? I sure wouldn't. Age him 20 years younger and get rid of his crab legs and maybe? But we're not here to talk about the box art because everyone else has pretty much said all that needs to be said. Everybody's made the same exact jokes, but I'm not like that. Instead, we're here to talk about the cooler PAL box art. Look at that! That looks like an action-packed game I want to buy. Mega Man actually looks realistic, and you can even see the Robot Masters in the background. If that was a 1950s sci-fi movie poster, I'd go see that movie. In fact, if that was the poster cover of a 1950s sci-fi movie on Netflix's sci-fi movie section, I'd still go see that. What went wrong with the US box art? Then again, the PAL region did screw up the Mega Man 2 box art where Mega Man looks like a weaponized Tin Man. Mega Man was developed and published by Capcom. Its team consisted of only 6 people. Kira Kitamura, who served as the director, also partially designed Mega Man in pixel art form, while recent college graduate Kaiji Inafune remade that illustration in hand-drawn format to what we know today and also contributed to the pixel art design in-game. Speaking of which, many gamers often credit Inafune as the creator and mastermind behind the Mega Man franchise, when really, this development team created Mega Man. Not just one person created him. Inafune himself in 2007 stated that by the time he joined the team, the Mega Man character was already created, and what he did was just refine the design of the character. In fact, the sprite designs for half the Robot Masters, Roll, Dr. Light, were already in the works. I'm not saying Inafune pushed aside the 5 other people and stuck his flag in the Mega Man game, claiming the franchise as his own. No, he did legitimately contribute to the franchise, but if even he disagrees with the Father of Mega Man status given to him by the fans, you know extra credit is being given where it's not due. Of course, it is easier to list one person as the creator of Mega Man. If anything, Kitamura himself is the father of Mega Man, but even that is a far-fetched statement. Finally released in 1987, Mega Man didn't sell that well initially. It probably did a lot better with re-releases on the Virtual Console as well as its inclusion of compilations like the Legacy Collection, but with these low sales for the initial release, we almost didn't get a Mega Man 2. Why didn't this game sell that well? Was it because of the ugly American box art, or was it because the NES scene was a competitive market to get into? It was not an established franchise at the time, and yes, while Capcom was known for titles like Ghosts and Goblins, they weren't the household name as much as they are now. Only later in the NES's lifespan is when they do make a name for themselves with the quality Mega Man sequels and Disney licensed games like DuckTales and Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers. But regardless of how poorly the first entry sold, this game was unlike anything out at the time. The manual for the American version, more specifically the PDF I found online, is kind of weird, and the story presented involves Dr. Wright, building Mega Man, the most powerful robot in Monsteropolis. And Monsteropolis is never mentioned ever again in the sequels, or even the remake. Anyways, Dr. Wright and his assistant, Dr. Wily, build 6 more humanoid robots, but of course, as the name suggests, Dr. Wily reprograms the 6 Robot Masters to do his bidding and control the world and its resources. The same plot cliches you've come to expect typical of this time period. So, Mega Man is reprogrammed to defend not the world, but the universe as well. In this game, Mega Man has to penetrate one of the 7 empires of Monsteropolis and defeat their rulers. Ugh, the story is so dumb. I'm pretty sure it was a last-minute addition. You begin the game seeing the Mega Man logo, and once you press start, you notice something quite odd. There are 6 squares with robot/humanoid sprites within them. They're labeled Fireman, Iceman, Electman, Gutsman, Bombman, not to be confused with Bomberman, and Cutman. Now you, with your 2017 or later mindset, would obviously know this is the level select of the game, but 29 plus years ago, the non-linear level select screen was something you wouldn't get right off the bat. You would usually have to use a cheat code to access a level select menu if it were any other game. But not for Mega Man 1, it was designed for you to choose the level you want to start out in. That doesn't mean there's no right answer, because some levels are better to start out on than others. Whereas if you start on Bomb Man, you would have little trouble taking him out with your Buster weapon, but if you were to fight Elect Man with just your default weapon, you would die very quickly at that boss fight. This is the design mentality the series thrives on, and unless you look up the info online of where to start, you would have to test the levels out for yourself to see which one is the best starting point. Which Robot Master can you easily take out with your default weapon? This is trial and error in a sense, but I kind of like this design. It respects the player enough for them to try out the level and see if they can get past the obstacle course laid out for them. With any non-linear pathway, the player should accept the consequences of what is to come with such freedom, although I only consider it good design for non-linear platformers if, say, some of the levels were harder but manageable. But to finish these levels, you actually have to fight some of these bosses, and the problem is some of them are impossible with the default weapon. That is questionable game design. I would prefer if they were much harder but manageable. But with Electman, thanks to the range and height of the beam attack and how much health it'll take away, he's pretty much impossible with the default weapon. As someone who doesn't like to use the acquired weapons within the levels themselves unless they have to, I can safely say that all the Robot Master levels can be beaten up to the boss room with just the default Buster weapon itself. With that said, the levels are designed well enough to accompany this non-linear game design mindset. But the non-linear level select is not the only thing Mega Man has going for it. Why do I talk about the Mega Busters so much? Because there's actually better options for weapons in this game. And you'll see why the level select comes into play, especially for these weapon types. Throughout the game, you will encounter the Robot Masters in their respective levels, and once you beat them, you can acquire their ability. For example, once I beat Bomb Man at the end of his stage, I acquired his Hyper Bomb ability, which can be used against the standard enemies throughout the levels, but Mega Man is known for a specific boss order designed in a rock, paper, scissors fashion. For example, Gutsman has the ability to throw stones, and his levels is rock-based, so his weakness would obviously be something that can destroy stone. Thinking about how explosive like dynamite can be used to destroy stone, the Hyper Bomb ability would be Gutsman's weakness. That's not to say the bosses will always have these subtle context clues as to who to fight next, but it is sometimes helpful in that regard. The weapons you can acquire are the Hyper Bomb, Rolling Cutter, Super Arm, Thunder Beam, Firestorm, Ice Slasher, and not really a weapon, but this device called the Magnet Beam can be found in Electman's stage. Of all these weapons, I found the Thunder Beam to be the most useful in combat, taking out enemies with the 3 zigzagging beams that can really drain the enemy's health really quickly. The Rolling Cutter is great for taking out enemies in higher places since it moves in a boomerang fashion. The Ice Slasher is more of a situational tool like freezing Flame Pillar Solid or freezing those hopper droids in midair. But the other weapons aren't commonly used except for boss battles and whenever the situation calls for them. The Super Arm, while it's cool that you can lift up stones and throw them at enemies, is pretty useless in areas without blocks. The Firestorm is a decent offensive weapon, but not as effective as the Thunder Beam from my observations. Even against Bomb Man, he would take 5 or 6 Firestorms to take down. And the Hyper Bomb seems to take longer than I would like in order for it to detonate, making it useless against fast-moving enemies. Heck, even when fighting against Gutsman where these bombs are his weakness, it's kind of tricky timing the Hyper Bomb in accordance to where he'll land when jumping. So the weapons are well balanced for the most part. While you do have ones that you'll use more than others, it's nice to know every weapon does have a purpose not just against a boss, but during some stages as well. The magnet beam you find in a Elecman stage, that's not really a weapon since all it does is form platforms temporarily, but even that is useful, although sometimes it can be used to skip a large portion of a level, like those disappearing platforms in Iceman stage. With all that being said, Mega Man 1 seems like it has all the bells and whistles needed to be a good Mega Man game. But unfortunately, with this being the first entry in the series, there will be some massive flaws present. Despite this game being the very first Mega Man game I played back when I was a teenager entering the retro game scene, I don't think this game holds up that well, unfortunately. The level design works very inconsistently, whereas some levels like Gutsman has a very decent challenge, like those platforms that open when crossing a gap, requiring the player to master timing. Flame Man stage offers something similar in terms of timing-based obstacles, where you have to either avoid the flame obstacles or make the use of the ice slasher to freeze the flame hazards. I even really like the inclusion of the disappearing block challenges in Iceman stage, requiring the player to analyze the pattern of when the blocks appear and disappear, and jump to the potential top of the next appearing block. It's really challenging, don't get me wrong, but quite a unique platforming obstacle, minus the slippery feeling of Mega Man's landing. Those are examples of decently designed levels, but despite these decent stages, there's also a few that are just average. I mean, Bomb Man stage has you shooting enemies like these missiles, and climbing ladders. That's about it. And the same can be said for Cutman stage, except Cutman stage is at least more vertical in design. They're not bad stages, don't get me wrong, but due to its combat-oriented focus rather than platforming, there's nothing really outstanding about them either. And then there's a Elecman stage. Oh boy, did I find this stage tedious. Not because those saucer enemies make jumping a hassle, no, those can be easily taken out with Cutman's weapon. I just find platforming in this stage to be rage-inducing, where you try to jump to the platform on the left, but then hit your metallic head on the platform above, causing you to fall down, climb back up, and try again. Not only that, but you have to be pixel perfect when climbing the ladders and avoiding the electricity, otherwise you'll fall all the way back down a few screens, with this being a vertically designed level. And once you beat all the Robot Master levels, the game kinda goes downhill from here. Yeah, Wily's Castle has 4 stages, and even when I first played them, I hated them. The first stage has you start off against 3 hoppers, and when you reach a series of blocks, this is the first time you'll notice a change in level design where now you have to use all of your acquired abilities to get by. That's alright, I like this idea. It's all fairly standard, but then you get to the spikes section of the level where there are several randomly moving platforms in between a floor and a ceiling of instant kill spikes, and these platforms can make the most patient player enrage when the first platform just won't descend when you want to. Sure, you can use your magnet beam to get by, but then sometimes I get shot when I try to make the second platform, stunned in place, and then the first one under me disappears, making me fall into the insta kill spikes. But that's not really the worst part. No! When you get past that, you'll face against Yellow Devil or Rock Monster, whatever you call it, and can I just say this is one of the worst bosses in retro gaming? For one, the rock parts fly in at you and you have to pretty much memorize the pattern if you want to avoid getting hit, which involves trial and error. There's no maneuvers you can use at the split second since, remember, Mega Man can't slide under it until Mega Man 3, so now you have to be pixel perfect with your jumps if you don't want touch damage. Which, by the way, if you get hit by one of these things, it'll take out a nice portion of your health. I could honestly never defeat this boss without using the Thunder Beam pause cheat where I press the select button repeatedly after deploying an electric beam. Some may say that's not entirely fair on my part, but if I have to fight a poorly designed boss battle that's hard for the wrong reasons, I might as well do the same to it. I've seen people legitimately defeat this boss, but compared to the later castle stage bosses, this boss is harder than Dr. Wily, only legitimizing my point against this unnecessary spike in difficulty. Stage 2 actually feels like a decent level, although despite fighting Cutman and Elecman again, with Cutman not allowing me to defeat him with his weakness due to an absence of rocks, the fight against Mega Man clone is actually really clever. You don't want to equip any of your powerful abilities because he'll only mirror that. So do you take him out with your Mega Buster or use a weapon that you can dodge yourself? It's all up to you. And Stage 3 doesn't really have anything going for it because all you do is go down vertical shafts and avoid penguin torpedoes and fight a bunch of bubble robots that are quite easy with a Mega Buster. In fact, it's so easy, this stage is pretty underwhelming. But Stage 4 strikes back with the annoying design choices again. This is the final level in the game, and despite there being an item that replenishes health and weapons energy, you have to fight not 1, not 2, not 3, but 6 boss battles. The first 4 are the remaining boss rush robot master clones you have to fight again, and this is when I question the design of some of these bosses. Gutsman and Bombman's attacks are avoidable for the most part, but Iceman's attacks are hard to avoid unless you use the magnet beam or something to get above the highest ice wave. But Fireman just likes to spam his attacks, and because the projectiles have a lot of height and are faster than human reaction time will allow, you will get hit by them. Even when you're using their weaknesses, it's highly unlikely you'll leave this battle unscathed. And then after that boss rush, you get near the end of the game. Sure, there are items to replenish weapon energy, and the final boss isn't too bad. Problem is, unless you use the select pause cheat during the boss rush, it's unlikely you'll have full health, making this two-face boss battle all the more frustrating. Why wasn't there any health items? I cannot tell you how many times I died due to arriving with just low health after that boss rush. The boss rush should have at least included partial health refills so that the final boss is reliant on legitimate challenge and not artificially created challenge. Design choices like these are why of all the classic Mega Man games on the NES, I don't go back to this one often, if at all. Yes, I think it should be played just for introducing a concept, but when you get a taste of the sequels and what they have to offer, there's just no contest, as they're clearly the superior experience to Mega Man 1, at least to me. I hear some division among NES enthusiasts when they say after the third entry, Mega Man just wasn't as enjoyable to them due to the charged Mega Buster, and insist the first 3 games were better in every way. That's fine and all, heck, some of my millennial comrades say the same thing, but none of them ever really talk about the merits of Mega Man 1. My friend Jay said it best when we talk about the classic series.
Whenever anyone says how the first 3 Mega Man games were the best, they seem to specifically be talking about Mega Man 2 and 3, but join Mega Man 1 in there just because, well, it's Mega Man 1, you know, it's not that great, but hey, we got Mega Man 2 and 3, it was the start of the series.
And from my observations, I often see that. Now, it's not like there's nothing good this game does. No, I do think the graphics are alright for the time, and the soundtrack is easily the best part of the game with the fast-paced catchy chiptunes like Electman, the intro theme, and Wily Castle 1, getting you into the mood to shoot things in the futuristic setting populated with robots. Heck, the soundtrack is probably what encouraged me to keep playing it. There's most certainly some fun to be had out of it, and despite some of the frustration with the later levels, the ending is quite climactic, with Mega Man going back home after defeating Dr. Wily. But overall, Mega Man 1, it starts out fine, but the later stages are frustrating as all heck. But despite all that, I think this game is very mediocre. Mega Man was undoubtedly a fresh concept for the time, but 30 years later with a ton of sequels that only improve upon this idea, it's kind of hard to enjoy this game all the way through. For one, the controls can be really slippery, making precise platforming needlessly tricky, where sometimes you think you'll land in the right spot, but you'll just fall into the abyss because you just slipped there. And the robot masters are either really easy with their weaknesses or frustratingly hard with your default weapon. There's a balance of fun and questionable design choices that only get addressed in later installments, and I guess for a lack of a better word, Mega Man 1, despite its idea, is a rocky start. Ha! Get it? Because Mega Man's real name is Rock? Like the music genre? Rocky start?
Alec, don't quit your day job.
Oh man, I was going to tour around the country doing stand-up comedy with my dad joke routine. I guess I'll have to stick to reviewing games from here on. Anyways, until part 2 of my Mega Man retrospective, which will be Mega Man 2. Thank you all so much for watching, and remember to stay awesome.